I stood in my kitchen at 6:30 in the morning, watching a locksmith I'd hired in secret change every lock in my house. My son and his wife were asleep upstairs. In 3 hours, their suitcases would be on my front porch, and my daughter-in-law would be screaming at me through a locked door. This wasn't how I thought my life would go when I opened my home to them 32 days ago. Marcus called me in early September, voice cracking, explaining the layoffs and the eviction notice. Chelsea's credit cards were maxed. They had nowhere to go. What kind of mother says no to that? So I said yes. I said, come home. I said, we'll figure it out together. I meant every word. Chelsea walked into my house like she was doing me a favor. Within a week, she'd rearranged my furniture, thrown away my mother's sweater, answered my phone like she owned the place. She took over my kitchen, my routine, my life. Marcus worked 14-hour days at his new job and came home too exhausted to notice his wife was slowly erasing me from my own house. I told myself I was being sensitive, that this was what compromise looked like, that young couples needed space to establish themselves. I made myself smaller. I bit my tongue. I let things go. Then yesterday morning, Chelsea stood on my back porch and told me we needed new ground rules. She wanted to take over the bills, the household decisions, everything. She said Marcus was worried about me living alone eventually. She mentioned assisted living. Her voice was so gentle when she said it, like she was doing me a kindness. I said I didn't need help managing my own house. That's when her face changed, when the mask slipped and I saw what had been there all along. She leaned in close and said if I couldn't be reasonable, if I couldn't accept help when it was offered, then maybe I was proving I needed more help than they could give. Maybe Marcus would need to look at other options for my care. I stared at her, at this woman in my house, sitting in my mother's chair, threatening to have my son put me in a nursing home. She smiled, actually smiled. Then she said the words that made me realize I'd invited a predator into my home. If you don't want to go live in a nursing home, you'll do what I say. I'm 64 years old. I ran 3 miles last Tuesday. I volunteer at the hospital thrift shop. I can thread a needle without reading glasses. And this woman was threatening to have me institutionalized unless I gave her control of my life. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my mother's chair and opened an envelope I'd found 6 months ago in her old secretary desk. An envelope marked, "For Evelyn, when you need strength." Inside were documents about this house, about the land it sits on, about mineral rights and mining companies and numbers that made my vision swim. My mother had been sitting on a fortune and lived like she had nothing because she wanted me to learn to be strong on my own first. The note she left said, "If someone tries to make you small, remember you have the power to stand tall. Use it wisely. Use it with love. But use it." So I called my attorney at dawn. I called a locksmith. I called a moving company. And now I'm standing here watching Tommy Rodriguez install new deadbolts while Chelsea and Marcus sleep upstairs, completely unaware that their lives are about to change. The movers are loading their belongings onto the front porch, their clothes, their boxes, everything. In my hand is a certified letter from my attorney explaining that they were guests, not tenants, that they have 24 hours to collect their things and that any harassment will result in a restraining order. Elsie is going to wake up in 20 minutes. She's going to come downstairs expecting her coffee made and me compliant. Instead, she's going to find her suitcases on my lawn, and the locks changed. Marcus is going to have to choose his wife or his mother, the woman who threatened to institutionalize me or the woman who raised him. I don't know what he'll choose. That's what's making my hands shake right now as I watch the locksmith finish the last door. I might lose my son over this. He might drive away with her and never come back. He might think I'm cruel, vindictive, crazy. But I know what happens if I don't do this. I've seen it happen to other women. They get smaller and smaller until they disappear completely, until they're in assisted living at 68, not because they need it, but because everyone convinced them they were helpless. I'm not helpless. I'm not declining. I'm not confused. I'm a woman who owns a house worth millions because of what's under the ground, and nobody knows it except my attorney and me. I'm a woman who just spent 32 days being systematically undermined in my own home. I'm a woman who got threatened with institutionalization by someone I welcomed with open arms. And I'm a woman who's about to find out if her son is the man she raised him to be, or if Chelsea has already destroyed that too. Tommy finishes the last lock, hands me the keys. The movers are putting the final suitcase on the porch. Everything is ready. I hear footsteps upstairs, a door opening, Chelsea's voice, sleepy, asking what that noise is. This is it. The moment everything changes, the moment I find out what I'm really made of, and what my son is really made of, and whether love is enough to survive the truth. I walk to the bottom of the stairs and call up. Good morning, Chelsea. Marcus. I need you both to come down, please. My voice is steady. My hands have stopped shaking. I'm standing in my house, on my land, with my mother's strength running through my veins. And whatever happens next, I'm ready. I should have seen it coming. That's what I told myself later, during the long nights when sleep wouldn't come, and the house creaked with all its familiar sounds, sounds that suddenly felt like accusations. But the truth is, you never really see it coming when someone you've welcomed into your life decides to take it over, piece by piece, until you're a stranger in your own home. It started the day they arrived. I'd spent the morning of September 3rd making up the guest room, the one that still had Marcus's high school baseball trophies on the shelf and his old poster of the Blue Ridge Parkway on the wall. I'd washed the windows until the late summer light poured through clean and golden. I'd put fresh flowers from the garden on the dresser, purple asters and the last of the summer roses, the pink ones my mother had planted 40 years ago. The house smelled like lemon polish and the apple cake I'd baked, because that was Marcus's favorite, and I wanted him to know he was coming home, not to charity. Chelsea stepped out of their Honda Civic first, her designer sunglasses reflecting the afternoon sun. She wore white jeans, impractical for moving, I thought, and a silk blouse that probably cost more than my entire week's grocery budget. Her dark hair was pulled back in a perfect ponytail. She surveyed the house with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between appreciation and assessment, like a real estate agent sizing up a property. It's bigger than I remembered, she said. Not to me, but to Marcus as he came around from the driver's side. My son looked tired, more than tired, hollowed out. The layoff had hit him hard. I knew that from our phone calls, but seeing him in person made my chest ache. His shoulders curved forward like he was carrying something heavy and invisible. When he hugged me, he held on a second longer than usual. Thanks for this, Mom, he whispered against my hair. It's just temporary. We'll be out of your way before you know it. I squeezed him back. You're never in my way. This is your home. Chelsea was already walking up the porch steps, her heels clicking against the painted boards. Is that original? She called back, pointing at the stained glass transom above the door. Amber and green leaves in an Art Nouveau pattern. From 1893, I said. My great-grandfather had it installed when he built the house. Gorgeous. Must be worth a fortune. She ran her finger along the doorframe. You really should get this wood looked at, though. Looks like it might be rotting here at the bottom. It wasn't rotting. I'd had it inspected 2 years ago, but I didn't say anything. I just smiled and held the door open. That first week, I told myself I was imagining things, the way Chelsea rearranged the living room furniture to improve the flow, the way she suggested I was using the wrong cleaning products. Mom Evelyn, you really shouldn't use that on hardwood. It'll ruin the finish. The way she started answering my phone with Pritchard residence, in a tone that made it sound like her residence. Marcus worked long hours at his new job, a software position at a startup downtown that paid $55,000 a year, less than half his old salary. He left at 7 in the morning and rarely got home before 8 at night. When he did, he looked exhausted, and Chelsea would greet him with a litany of small complaints. The water pressure was weak, the Wi-Fi was slow, there was a draft in their room. "Mom, you really should get these things looked at," Marcus would say gently, like I was elderly and forgetful. Not a woman who'd maintained this house for 30 years. I started keeping a list in my head of all the things Chelsea changed. By the end of the second week, it was substantial. She'd thrown away my kitchen sponges and replaced them with her own. She'd rearranged my spice cabinet alphabetically, so it makes sense. She'd moved my mother's serving dishes to a high shelf I needed a step stool to reach, putting her own modern white plates in the easy-access cabinet. She'd unplugged my small TV in the kitchen. Nobody watches TV while cooking anymore. Mom Evelyn, it's so 1990s, and set up her laptop there instead, playing podcasts about wellness and entrepreneurship at volumes that made conversation impossible. But I bit my tongue. I remembered being a young wife, remembered the tension of living with my own mother-in-law for 6 months when Marcus was a baby. I remembered feeling judged, second-guessed, like I couldn't do anything right. I didn't want to be that person to Chelsea, so I adjusted. I adapted. I made myself smaller. Sunday mornings, I'd always gone to early Mass at St. Catherine's, the stone church on Charlotte Street where I'd been baptized, where Marcus had received his first communion, where we'd held his father's funeral. The third Sunday after they moved in, I came downstairs at 6:30 to find Chelsea already in the kitchen, making herself coffee with my French press. "Oh, you're up early," she said, not looking at me. She was scrolling through her phone with one hand. "I'm heading to church," I said, reaching for my purse on the hook by the door. "Church?" She looked up, eyebrows raised slightly. "Marcus mentioned you were religious." The way she said religious made it sound like a quirky hobby, like collecting stamps or doing crossword puzzles. "I go every Sunday," I said. My voice came out more defensive than I'd intended. "That's nice." She took a sip of her coffee. "You know, they say routine is really important for older adults. Gives structure to the day." I was 64, not 84, but I let it go. I let a lot of things go in those early weeks. At St. Catherine's, I sat in my usual pew, 4th row from the back, left side, where the morning light came through the blue-stained glass and painted everything the color of hope. Father Miguel gave a homily about the prodigal son, about welcome and forgiveness, and the father who watched the road. I thought about Marcus, about how I'd always be watching the road for him, waiting to welcome him home. But I also thought about the other son, the one who stayed, the one who did everything right and felt taken for granted. I'd never thought much about that son before. After Mass, Eleanor Patterson caught me in the vestibule. She was 72, sharp as a tack, and had known my mother. "How are your house guests?" she asked, her eyes kind but knowing. "Fine," I said automatically. "It's nice to have Marcus home." "And his wife?" I hesitated a second too long. Eleanor patted my arm. "Your mother used to say that sometimes the hardest grace to give is the kind that isn't appreciated," she said. "But it's still grace. Remember that." I drove home thinking about grace, about the kind that costs something, about whether there was a difference between grace and being a doormat. When I walked in the front door, I could hear voices in the kitchen, raised voices. I set my purse down quietly and stood in the hallway, not quite eavesdropping, but not quite walking away either. "Can't keep doing this," Marcus was saying. "She's my mother, Chels. This is her house. And we're paying for groceries," Chelsea shot back. "We're contributing. I don't see why she needs to control every little thing." The way she looks at me when I move something, like I'm committing a crime. She's not controlling anything. She's just She's passive-aggressive. That's what she is. The sighing, the little comments about how things used to be done. I'm trying to help, and she treats me like I'm attacking her. My hand was on the wall, steadying myself. I hadn't sighed, or if I had, I hadn't meant it as commentary. Had I? Maybe we should look for an apartment, Marcus said quietly. I know money's tight, but we can't afford an apartment in Asheville right now, and you know it. Not with your salary, not with my student loans. Chelsea's voice dropped, became softer, more persuasive. Baby, I know this is hard, but we have to be practical. Your mom has this whole big house to herself. We're actually doing her a favor, keeping her company. She should be grateful. I walked away before I could hear Marcus's response. I went upstairs to my room, my mother's old room, with the 4-poster bed and the view of the garden, and sat on the edge of the mattress, hands folded in my lap. Should be grateful. The words sat in my chest like stones. That night at dinner, chicken piccata, Marcus's favorite, which I'd spent an hour making. Chelsea picked at her food and said, Mom, Evelyn, this is delicious, but, you know, with Marcus's cholesterol, we really should be eating leaner proteins. Maybe more fish. I can make a meal plan if you want. Marcus didn't look up from his plate, just nodded slightly. I took a bite of chicken that tasted like sawdust and said, That would be lovely, Chelsea. Thank you. The 4th week brought small escalations. Chelsea started going through my mail. I was just organizing, and I noticed you have a lot of bills piling up. Do you need help managing your finances? She rearranged my bedroom closet while I was at my book club. I was looking for extra hangers, and I noticed your system was kind of chaotic, so I color coordinated everything for you. She threw away a sweater I'd been meaning to mend. Oh, that ratty old thing. I thought it was for donation. I'll buy you a new one. It was the sweater my mother had knitted the year before she died. I found it in the kitchen trash, buried under coffee grounds and chicken bones. I washed it in the sink, my hands shaking, and hung it to dry in my bathroom where Chelsea wouldn't find it. That Sunday, Father Miguel's homily was about righteous anger, about Jesus overturning the tables in the temple, about how love sometimes required boundaries. I listened with my hands clasped so tight, my knuckles went white. On day 28, I came home from my volunteer shift at the hospital thrift shop to find Chelsea in my mother's chair, the one by the window, the one with the carved mahogany arms and the needlepoint cushion my mother had made. This is such a beautiful spot, Chelsea said, not getting up. The light is amazing here. I might start doing my morning journaling in this chair. That was my mother's chair, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Oh, I know. Marcus told me. But she's gone, right? And furniture is meant to be used. She smiled. You don't mind, do you? Yes, I minded. I minded so much I could barely breathe. But the way she asked, with that smile that dared me to be the unreasonable one, the difficult one, the bitter old woman who couldn't share, I found myself saying, Of course not. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle, and I thought about all the ways I'd made myself smaller, all the yeses I'd given when I meant no, all the moments I'd swallowed words that needed to be said. I thought about my mother, who'd survived my father's death and the Depression, and raised 3 kids alone, who'd worked as a seamstress and cleaned houses and never once let anyone make her feel less than, who'd told me in the hospital during her final days, Evelyn, being kind doesn't mean being weak. Don't ever forget the difference. I'd forgotten the difference. Day 30 brought the thermostat war. I liked the house at 68 degrees. Chelsea kept turning it up to 74. I'd turn it down when she was out. She'd turn it up. Finally, she taped a note to it. Please don't adjust. 74 is normal room temperature. If you're cold, wear a sweater. In my own house. A note about the thermostat. In my own house. Day 31. I came home from grocery shopping. I was still doing all the grocery shopping, plus the cooking, plus the cleaning, despite Chelsea's promises to help out, to find her in my office. My small office off the kitchen where I paid bills and did crossword puzzles and kept my mother's old secretary desk. "What are you doing?" I asked from the doorway. She jumped slightly, hand on one of the desk drawers. "Oh, you scared me. I was just looking for a pen." The secretary desk had 6 drawers. She'd been in the bottom left one, the one with the lock, though I rarely locked it. The one where I kept my important papers, my mother's things. "There are pens in the kitchen," I said carefully. "Right, of course." She smiled brightly and slipped past me. "Found one anyway." After she left, I checked the drawer. Nothing seemed disturbed, but I couldn't be sure. I made a mental note to get a proper lock, just in case. That night, Marcus worked late again. Chelsea made herself dinner, take-out Thai food she'd ordered on her phone, and ate it in front of the TV in the living room. My mother's TV that Chelsea had upgraded with a streaming stick. She didn't offer me any, didn't ask if I'd eaten. I made myself a sandwich and ate it at the kitchen table, alone, listening to the laugh track from whatever show she was watching. This is temporary, I told myself. This is just an adjustment period. They'll find a place soon, and things will go back to normal. But some part of me, the part that had been paying attention to the small cruelties, the tiny invasions, the way Chelsea's eyes had lingered on that secretary desk, that part knew better. Day 32 started like any other day. Marcus left for work at 7. I made coffee and took it out to the back porch, where September morning air was just starting to turn crisp. The garden needed attention. The roses needed deadheading. The flower beds needed weeding. I'd been neglecting them since Chelsea and Marcus arrived, too busy trying to keep the peace inside to tend to the growing things outside. I was finishing my coffee, planning my day, grocery store, then maybe finally tackle those roses, when I heard the screen door open behind me. Chelsea came out in yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, her hair in a messy bun. She looked younger in the morning, without makeup, almost vulnerable. For a second, I thought maybe we'd have a real conversation. Maybe she'd sit down and we'd talk like women, like family, and find some way to make this work. Instead, she leaned against the porch railing and crossed her arms. "We need to talk," she said. Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. I set down my coffee mug slowly. "All right," I said. "This isn't working," she said. "The situation. Marcus is miserable, though he won't say it. He feels guilty being here, like he's failed somehow. And I feel like I'm walking on eggshells, trying not to upset you." I opened my mouth to speak, but she held up a hand. "Let me finish. I think we need some new ground rules, some structure. Marcus and I have been talking, and we think it would be better if we took over more of the household management, the bills, the maintenance, the day-to-day decisions. You've been doing it alone for so long, and at your age, it must be exhausting. At my age, I was 64. I ran 3 miles every Tuesday and Thursday. I volunteered 2 days a week. I could still thread a needle without reading glasses. I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but I'm managing just fine." "Are you, though?" She tilted her head, her voice gentle in a way that felt like condescension. "Because I've noticed some things. Forgetting to lock the doors at night, letting the mail pile up, the confusion about the thermostat settings." "I'm not confused about the thermostat. And Marcus is worried about you being here alone when we eventually move out. He's been talking about maybe looking into assisted living options. Not now," she added quickly, "but eventually. Places that would give you more support." The world seemed to tilt slightly. Assisted living. The phrase hung in the air between us like smoke. "I don't need assisted living," I said. My voice sounded far away. "I'm perfectly capable." "Of course you are. Right now." But we're thinking ahead. Being practical. She moved closer, sat down in the chair next to mine. "Here's what I'm proposing. We stay here, help you manage things, and in exchange, you let us take the lead on household decisions. It would take so much pressure off you." I looked at her carefully, at the way she sat in my mother's chair, not borrowed, but claimed. At the way she spoke about my house, my life, like it was a problem to be solved. "And if I say no?" I asked quietly. Her expression shifted just slightly. A hardness came into her eyes. "Then I think we'd need to have a more serious conversation about whether this living situation is healthy for anyone, about whether you're really able to maintain this house on your own." She paused. "About what Marcus would need to do to make sure you're safe." There it was, the threat wrapped in concern, the cage built from loving words. "Chelsea," I said slowly, "are you threatening to have Marcus put me in a nursing home?" "Of course not." She laughed, but it was brittle. "I'm just saying that if you can't be reasonable, if you can't accept help when it's offered, then maybe you're proving you need more help than we can give here. Maybe Marcus would need to look at other options for your care." The words came from somewhere deep, somewhere I didn't know I still had access to. "Get out." She blinked. "What?" "Get out of my chair. Get away from me." She stood up slowly, her face flushing. "You're being dramatic. I'm being clear. This is my house, my life, and I won't be threatened in my own home." Her eyes went cold, actually cold, like something had frozen over inside her. "Fine," she said. "Be stubborn. But when Marcus gets home tonight, we're going to have a family conversation, and you're going to have to decide. Either you let us help you the way we think is best, or..." She shrugged. "Well, if you don't want to go live in a nursing home, you'll do what I say." She walked back inside, leaving me alone on the porch with my cold coffee and the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I sat there for a long time. I thought about calling Marcus, but what would I say? "Your wife just threatened to put me in a home unless I give her control of my house?" He'd think I was exaggerating, being difficult. He'd come home and Chelsea would cry and say she'd only been trying to help, only been worried. And I'd be the villain. I thought about calling Father Miguel, but what could he do? Say a prayer? Tell me to turn the other cheek? I thought about my friends, but the thought of admitting this to them, of saying out loud that I'd been backed into a corner in my own home, felt like swallowing glass. Instead, I stood up slowly. I went inside. I walked past Chelsea, who was back on the couch scrolling through her phone, and I went upstairs to my room. I closed the door, locked it, and I opened my mother's old secretary desk. I pulled out the envelope marked, "For Evelyn, when you need strength." I'd found it 6 months ago, tucked in the very back of the bottom drawer, behind old tax returns and yellowed newspaper clippings. I'd opened it once, read it once, then put it away, thinking I'd never need it, thinking my mother's worry had been needless. Now I spread the contents on my bed, the quitclaim deed, the mineral rights documents, the letters from mining companies, the appraisal paperwork. My mother had owned this land for 50 years. Her father had owned it before that. And beneath this land, beneath the garden and the house and the magnolia trees, lay something the mining companies had been trying to buy for decades. Rare earth minerals, lithium deposits. Whatever the technical terms were, they translated to one simple truth. This land was worth millions. My mother had kept it quiet, lived simply, wanted me to do the same. But she'd left me this envelope with a note in her shaky handwriting. "Evelyn, I stayed small so you could grow strong on your own. But if the day comes when someone tries to make you small, remember, you have the power to stand tall. Use it wisely. Use it with love. But use it. Mama." I sat on my bed, papers spread around me, and I felt something shift inside. Not anger exactly. Something colder. Something clearer. I picked up my phone. I called my mother's old attorney, Howard Miller. He was retired now, but he'd told me at her funeral to call if I ever needed anything. "Howard," I said when he answered, "I need your help. By 6 p.m., I'd made a dozen calls. By 7, I had a plan. By 8, when I heard Marcus's car pull into the driveway, I was sitting in my mother's chair by the window, hands folded, waiting. I heard him come in. Heard Chelsea's voice, low and urgent, telling him her version of the morning. Heard their footsteps coming toward the living room. Marcus appeared in the doorway looking exhausted and worried. Chelsea stood behind him, her hand on his shoulder. "Mom," he said gently. "Chelsea told me you two had a misunderstanding this morning. Can we talk about it?" I looked at my son, really looked at him, tried to see past the exhaustion to the boy I'd raised, the one I'd taught to say, "Please and thank you," the one I'd told that strength meant protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. "We can talk," I said, "but not tonight. Tonight I need you both to listen." Chelsea started to speak, but I held up my hand. "Tomorrow morning," I said, "there will be changes in this house. What those changes are depends on choices you're going to make tonight. But either way, things are going to be different." "Mom, you're not making sense." "I'm making perfect sense, Marcus. For the first time in 32 days. I'm making perfect sense." I stood up. "Think about what you want from this life. What kind of man you want to be. What kind of marriage you want to have. And tomorrow, we'll talk about what happens next." I walked past them, went upstairs, and locked my door. I didn't sleep that night, but I didn't cry either. I'd made my choice. Now they'd have to make theirs. And whatever came next, I'd face it standing tall. The locksmith arrived at 6:30 in the morning, just as the first light was turning the sky above Asheville from black to gray. I'd been awake since 4, dressed since 5, sitting at the kitchen table with coffee I couldn't taste, and a list of phone numbers I'd already memorized. His name was Tommy Rodriguez. He'd gone to school with Marcus, played baseball with him, sophomore year before Tommy's family moved to Hendersonville. He was 40 now, thick around the middle, with kind eyes and a wedding ring that caught the early light. "Mrs. Pritchard," he said quietly when I opened the door. "You sure about this?" I nodded. I didn't trust my voice yet. "All right then. Let's get it done before anyone wakes up." He worked efficiently, removing the old locks, installing new deadbolts. Front door, back door, side door that led to the garden. The sound of his drill seemed impossibly loud in the morning quiet. I kept glancing upstairs, expecting to see Marcus or Chelsea appear, but their bedroom door stayed closed. "Keys," Tommy said, handing me a small envelope. "There's 3 sets. I put the old locks in my truck if you want them back." "Keep them," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Tommy, thank you." He looked at me for a long moment. "My abuela lived with us when I was growing up. My mom's mom. And my dad's sister moved in for a while when she got divorced." He shook his head. "It didn't go well. Sometimes family under one roof brings out the worst in people." He squeezed my shoulder gently. "You take care of yourself, Mrs. P. You deserve better than being pushed around in your own home." After he left, I stood in the foyer looking at the new brass locks. They gleamed in the morning light coming through the stained glass transom. Something about their newness, their solidity, made me feel like I could breathe deeper. The moving company arrived at 7:15. 2 men, professionals, who'd agreed to work quickly and quietly. I'd already put sticky notes on everything that belonged to Chelsea and Marcus. Their clothes in the guest room closet, their toiletries in the bathroom, the boxes they'd never unpacked from the garage. The movers worked like choreographed dancers, carrying suitcases and boxes and garbage bags full of clothes down the stairs, out to the porch, arranging them neatly on the front walkway. At 7:45, I heard footsteps upstairs, a door opening, Chelsea's voice, sleepy and confused. "What's that noise?" I went to the bottom of the stairs and called up. "Good morning, Chelsea. Marcus, I need you both to come down, please." Chelsea appeared at the top of the stairs in a silk robe, her hair mussed, her face still creased from the pillow. Behind her, Marcus was pulling on a t-shirt. looking bewildered. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked. "What's all that noise?" "Come downstairs," I said. "Both of you." They descended slowly. I watched Marcus's face change as he saw the new locks on the front door, saw the gaps in the foyer where their coats used to hang. Chelsea's expression went from confusion to understanding to fury in the span of 3 seconds. "What did you do?" she breathed. I walked to the front door, opened it. The movers were just finishing, arranging the last suitcase carefully on the porch. Beyond them, the sun was rising over the neighborhood, painting everything gold. "Your things are on the porch," I said calmly. "I've changed the locks. There's a letter from my attorney on top of your suitcases, explaining your rights and my expectations. You have 24 hours to collect everything and arrange for storage or other accommodations." Chelsea's face went white, then red. "You can't do this. This is illegal. This is—" "Marcus, say something." Marcus was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. "Mom, what? Why would you—" "Because yesterday your wife threatened to have me put in a nursing home if I didn't give her control of my house," I said. The words came out steady, clear. "She told me that unless I did what she said, you'd need to look at other options for my care. In my own home, the home I opened to you when you needed help." "That's not what I said," Chelsea protested. But her voice was shrill now, defensive. "I was trying to help. I was worried about her living alone. Marcus, you know that. You said yourself she's been forgetful." "I haven't been forgetful," I said. "I've been paying attention to every small way you tried to take over my life, every criticism disguised as concern, every threat wrapped in sweetness." Marcus ran his hand through his hair. He looked lost. "Mom, this is crazy. We don't have anywhere to go. We don't have money for a security deposit or first month's rent. That's not my problem to solve," I said, and the words hurt coming out, but they needed to be said. "You're a grown man, Marcus. You have a job. You have options. What you don't have is the right to let your wife terrorize me in my own home." "Terrorize?" Chelsea laughed, but it was ugly. "Oh, that's rich. I tried to help you. I tried to make things easier. And this is how you repay me? By throwing us out like trash?" "You're not trash," I said quietly. "You're people who need to find your own way. Just not here. Not anymore." Chelsea turned to Marcus, grabbing his arm. "Are you going to let her do this? Are you seriously going to choose her over me?" And there it was, the choice I'd been dreading, the moment I'd known would come. Marcus looked between us, his wife, his mother. I could see the war happening behind his eyes. The guilt, the loyalty pulled in 2 directions. The little boy who wanted to make everyone happy, and the man who was realizing, you can't always do that. "I need to think," he said finally. I need some air." He walked past us both, out the front door, down the porch steps. He stood on the front lawn in his t-shirt and sweatpants, hands on his hips, staring at nothing. Chelsea whirled on me. Her face was twisted now, all pretense of pleasantness gone. "You bitter old bitch," she hissed. "You're jealous. You're jealous that he chose me, that he has a life beyond being your little boy. You want to keep him dependent on you forever." "No," I said. "I want him to be strong enough to stand on his own. Something you've spent the last month preventing." "We'll sue you," she spat. "We'll take you for everything you've got. Illegal eviction, elder abuse. Read the letter from my attorney," I said. "You were guests, not tenants. You paid no rent. You signed no lease. You have no legal claim to this house. And if you try to make one, we'll have a very public conversation about harassment and verbal abuse of a homeowner." She stared at me, breathing hard. Then she smiled, and it was chilling. "You'll be alone," she said softly. "You think Marcus is going to forgive this? You think he's going to choose you? He's going to walk out that door with me, and you're going to die alone in this big empty house with nobody who cares about you. The words landed like she meant them to, sharp, aimed at my softest places. For a second, I felt them hit, felt the fear of being alone, abandoned, forgotten. Then I thought of my mother, of the strength she'd left me, of the note that said, "Stand tall." "Maybe," I said, "but I'd rather be alone with my dignity than surrounded by people who make me feel small." Chelsea made a sound of disgust and stormed up the stairs. I heard her in the guest room, slamming drawers, throwing things. The movers had left most of their belongings, but there were personal items still scattered through the house. I went to the kitchen and made more coffee. My hands were shaking now, the adrenaline wearing off. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. There was no taking it back. Through the window, I could see Marcus still standing on the lawn. His shoulders were shaking. He was crying. Everything in me wanted to go to him, to take it all back, to say I was sorry. We'd find another way. Come back inside, and we'll figure this out together. That's what mothers do. They sacrifice. They yield. They make themselves smaller so their children can grow. But I'd been making myself smaller for 32 days. And if I went out there now, if I backed down, Chelsea would know she'd won. And Marcus would never learn that actions have consequences. That protecting your wife doesn't mean letting her hurt other people. That being a man, it means having the courage to draw boundaries, even when it's hard. So I stayed in the kitchen. I drank my coffee, and I waited. At 8:30, my phone rang. It was Howard Miller, my attorney. "Evelyn," he said, "I wanted to confirm everything's in motion. The certified letters will be delivered by close of business today. I've also prepared the documents we discussed regarding the property assessment and mineral rights. When you're ready to proceed with that, just give me the word." "Not yet," I said. "Let's see how today unfolds first." "Understood. And Evelyn, you did the right thing. I've seen too many people in your situation wait until they've lost everything. At least you're standing up while you still have ground to stand on." After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table and looked around at my mother's kitchen. The white cabinets she'd painted herself. The butcher block counters she'd saved for 3 years to afford. The window over the sink where she'd stood washing dishes and watching birds at the feeder and humming hymns under her breath. This was her legacy. Not just the house, but the strength to protect it. Chelsea came downstairs 40 minutes later, fully dressed, makeup on, pulling a rolling suitcase. She didn't look at me, just walked straight to the front door. Marcus came in from the yard as she was loading bags into their car. His eyes were red. He looked at me through the screen door, and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Disappointment. Not in Chelsea, in me. "Mom," he said, "I don't understand. How could you do this?" I went to the door but didn't open it, kept the screen between us like a barrier. "How could I protect myself?" I asked quietly. "How could I refuse to be threatened in my own home?" "Marcus, what did you think would happen? Did you think I'd just accept being pushed aside in the house I've lived in for 40 years? The house your grandmother left me?" "She was trying to help," he said, but his voice cracked on the words. "Was she? Or was she trying to take over?" I shook my head. "You know what she said to me yesterday. If you're honest with yourself, you know." He looked away. "She was just stressed. The move, the money problems. Don't make excuses for her, Marcus. You're better than that." "Better than what? Better than standing by my wife? Better than letting her abuse your mother?" The word hung in the air between us. Abuse. Such a strong word. But what else do you call it when someone threatens you with institutionalization for not surrendering control of your own life? "That's not fair," he whispered. "No," I agreed. "None of this is fair. But it's true." Chelsea honked the horn. Marcus flinched. "I have to go," he said. "I know. I don't know when I'll be back." "I know that too." He stood there for another moment, and I could see him struggling. Could see the little boy who'd skinned his knee and wanted his mother. Could see the man who'd made a vow to his wife. could see them at war inside him. "I love you, Mom," he said finally. "I love you too. That's why I'm doing this." He walked away, got in the car. Chelsea pulled out of the driveway without looking back. I watched them disappear down Magnolia Street, and then I closed the door, locked it, put my forehead against the cool wood, and let myself breathe. I'd done it, and I'd lost my son, at least for now. The house felt different after they left. Quieter, yes, but also lighter somehow. Like a weight had been lifted from the walls themselves. I walked through the rooms, straightening things Chelsea had moved, putting things back where they belonged. My mother's dishes in the low cabinet, my spices arranged the way I liked them, the thermostat set to 68. It was petty maybe, but it was mine again. That afternoon, Eleanor Patterson called. "I heard," she said without preamble. "Janice Crowley's nephew is the locksmith, and she called me. Are you all right?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I feel like I did something terrible and necessary at the same time." "Good," she said. "That's how you know you did the right thing. The easy thing never feels like that." Marcus left with her. Of course he did. He's married to her. But that doesn't mean he won't come back. Men are slow learners, Evelyn. But most of them get there eventually. What if he doesn't? She was quiet for a moment. Then you'll survive that too. The same way your mother survived your father's death. The same way we all survive the things that break our hearts. One day at a time, with as much grace as we can manage. That evening, I made myself dinner. Just a simple omelet and toast, and ate it at the kitchen table with a book. It felt strange and lonely and also peaceful. I kept expecting to hear Chelsea's voice from the living room, kept bracing for criticism about the cooking or the lighting or the way I held my fork. But there was only silence. And after a while, the silence started to feel like relief. I slept that night. Actually slept, for the first time in weeks. Deep, dreamless sleep in my mother's bed, with the windows cracked open and the sound of crickets drifting in. I woke to sun, streaming through the curtains and the smell of gardenias from the garden below. For a moment, I'd forgotten everything. Then it all came rushing back. The locks, the confrontation, Marcus driving away. My phone had 3 missed calls, all from numbers I didn't recognize. There was also a voicemail from Marcus, left at 6 in the morning. "Mom, it's me. We're staying at a motel off the highway. Chelsea wants me to call a lawyer, but I don't know. I don't know what to do. I keep thinking about what you said, about what she said. I remember now, little things, ways she talked about you when you weren't around. I didn't want to see it. I'm not saying you were right to kick us out. I'm not saying I forgive you. But I'm not saying you were completely wrong either. I need time to think. Don't call me back. I'll call you when I'm ready." I played it 3 times, listened to the exhaustion in his voice, the confusion. But also, maybe I was imagining it, the first hint of clarity. I didn't call him back. I'd said what I needed to say. The rest was up to him. Instead, I called Howard Miller. "I'm ready," I said. "Let's talk about the mineral rights." We met that afternoon at his office downtown, in one of the old brick buildings on Biltmore Avenue. He spread the papers across his desk, surveys, assessments, offers from mining companies dating back 30 years. "Your mother was a shrewd woman," he said. "She knew what she had, but she didn't want the complication. Didn't want people treating her differently because of money. But she documented everything, kept every offer, had everything appraised regularly. This folder represents roughly 40 years of value accumulation." He pointed to the most recent assessment, dated 4 months before my mother died. The number made my vision swim. That's not possible," I breathed. "It's conservative, actually. The market for rare earth minerals has exploded in the last decade. Electric cars, batteries, technology. What's under your property is increasingly valuable." He looked at me seriously. "You have options, Evelyn. You can sell the mineral rights and keep the land. You can sell everything. You can lease the rights for ongoing royalties. But whatever you do, you're not a poor widow who needs to be managed. You're a wealthy woman who's been living quietly. I stared at the papers, at the numbers, at the proof that everything Chelsea had assumed about me, about my vulnerability, my dependence, my need for help, was based on a lie. Not a lie I'd told, but a lie she'd told herself because it made me easier to control. I want Marcus to know, I said. Not to hurt him, but because he needs to understand. He needs to see that the person Chelsea tried to convince him I was, fragile, declining, incompetent, wasn't real. That's a conversation you'll need to have carefully, Howard said. Money changes things, sometimes not for the better. I know, but the truth matters more than comfort. It always has. I left his office with a folder full of documents and a head full of questions. What would I do with this information? This power? Would I keep living simply, the way my mother had? Would I sell and move somewhere new, start over? Or would I do what my mother's note suggested? Use it wisely, use it with love, but use it. I was halfway home when my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Mrs. Pritchard? A woman's voice, young, uncertain. This is Lisa Chen. I'm a social worker with Blue Ridge Senior Services. I received a call this morning from a Chelsea Pritchard expressing concern about your well-being. She indicated you might be experiencing some cognitive decline and safety issues. I was hoping we could schedule a home visit to assess your needs. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. What exactly did Mrs. Pritchard tell you? I asked carefully. She mentioned memory problems, confusion about finances, difficulty managing daily tasks. She seemed quite worried. A pause. Mrs. Pritchard, I want you to know this is just an initial assessment. There's no judgment. We're here to help. I pulled into a gas station parking lot and put the car in park. Ms. Chen, I said, keeping my voice level. I appreciate your concern, but I need to be very clear with you. I am 64 years old. I am in excellent health. I have no memory problems, no confusion, no difficulty managing my life. What you received was a vindictive call from my former daughter-in-law, who I removed from my home yesterday after she threatened to have me institutionalized if I didn't give her control of my house. This is harassment, not concern. Silence on the other end. Then, I see. Mrs. Pritchard, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, when we receive these calls, we're required to follow up. But I can note in my report that you declined services and appear competent and capable. If you'd like, I can provide you with resources about elder abuse and how to protect yourself from future harassment. Yes, I said, please do. After we hung up, I sat in the parking lot shaking. She'd done it. Chelsea had actually called social services to try to build a case that I was incompetent. If I hadn't acted yesterday, if I'd waited, she would have been documenting my supposed decline, building evidence, positioning herself as the concerned family member just trying to help. And Marcus might have believed her. I called Howard Miller from the parking lot. She called Senior Services, I told him. Chelsea, trying to claim I'm declining. Document everything, he said immediately. Every call, every contact. We may need a restraining order. And Evelyn, this is why you did the right thing. This is who she is. I drove home slowly, watching Asheville slide past my windows. The tourists on the streets with their cameras and their sundresses. The locals walking dogs and drinking coffee and living their normal lives. Everything looked the same as it had yesterday, but I'd stepped into some new version of my life where I was both more powerful and more vulnerable than I'd ever been. That evening, I sat in my mother's chair by the window and watched the sunset paint the garden gold and pink. The roses needed deadheading. The flower beds needed weeding. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow I'll start putting things back together. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Chelsea told me you had social services called on us. Said you tried to claim we were abusing you. Mom, how could you?" I stared at the screen. The audacity of the lie took my breath away. She'd flipped the script completely. Made herself the victim. I typed back. "That's not what happened. Call the social worker if you don't believe me. Lisa Chen with Blue Ridge Senior Services. She'll tell you who called who." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then, I don't know what to believe anymore. And that, I realized, was the saddest part. Not that he was choosing Chelsea over me, but that he was so lost in the confusion of competing narratives that he couldn't see the truth even when it was staring him in the face. I put the phone down. I wouldn't chase him. Wouldn't try to convince him. He'd have to find his way back on his own, if he ever did. The next day, Father Miguel called. "Evelyn," he said gently, "I heard what happened. Are you all right?" "I'm standing," I said. "That's something. Would you like to talk? I have time this afternoon." We met at the church, in his small office that smelled like old books and lemon polish. I told him everything. The threats, the manipulation, the lockout, the call to social services. He listened without interrupting, his weathered hands folded on his desk. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Do you think you did the right thing?" he asked finally. "I don't know. I know I couldn't keep living the way I was. Does that count?" "Yes," he said. "It counts. But Evelyn, I want you to prepare yourself for the possibility that Marcus might not come back, that this might cost you your relationship with your son, at least for a time. Can you live with that?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. "I think," I said slowly, "that loving someone doesn't mean letting them hurt you. And it doesn't mean protecting them from the consequences of their choices. I think Marcus needs to learn who he married. And he can't do that while I'm absorbing all her cruelty for him." Father Miguel nodded. "That's wisdom. Hard wisdom, but wisdom nonetheless." He paused. "There's a story in Luke about the father who lets his son take his inheritance early and go waste it. The father doesn't chase him, doesn't try to control him, doesn't send people to check on him. He lets him fall. And when the son finally comes to his senses, the father is watching the road, waiting, ready to run to him." "The prodigal son," I said. "Yes, but I think sometimes we focus on the son who left and forget about the father who had to watch him go. That took faith too. Faith that the son would find his way back, and strength to wait without intervening. I felt tears start to burn behind my eyes. What if he doesn't come back? Then you'll grieve, and you'll survive, and you'll know you did what you could with love and strength and integrity." He reached across the desk and took my hand. "You're not alone in this, Evelyn. The church is here. Your friends are here. And God is here, even in the waiting." I cried then, finally cried. For Marcus driving away, for the grandson I might never have, for the family dinners that wouldn't happen, and the holidays that would be hollow, for the loss of the dream I'd had that love was enough to fix everything. When I left the church, the sun was setting again. Another day almost over. Another day survived. At home, I changed into old clothes and went out to the garden. I spent 2 hours deadheading roses, pulling weeds, cleaning up the beds that had been neglected for over a month. My back ached, my knees protested, but there was something deeply satisfying about the work, about making order out of chaos, about the physical evidence of care. When I finished, the garden looked loved again, tended, like someone lived here who paid attention. I stood on the back porch in the twilight, dirt under my fingernails, and felt something settle in my chest. Peace, maybe, or just exhaustion. But either way, it felt like I could breathe. My phone rang. Marcus again. This time, I answered. "Mom," he said. His voice was rough, like he'd been crying. "I called the social worker. She told me it was Chelsea who called, not you. Chelsea who claimed you were declining. I waited, didn't fill the silence. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. I did tell you. You said you didn't know what to believe. Another long pause. Chelsea says the social worker is lying. That you probably paid her off or something. But Mom, that doesn't make sense. Why would a social worker lie? She wouldn't, I said quietly. But Marcus, I can't make you see what you're not ready to see. You have to decide for yourself who you believe, who you want to be married to, what kind of man you want to be. That's not fair. No, I agreed. It's not. None of this is fair. But it's real, and you're going to have to decide what you do with that. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but I felt strangely calm. I'd said my piece. The rest was up to him. That night, I dreamed about my mother. She was standing in the garden in her Sunday dress, deadheading roses like I'd just done. She looked up when she saw me, smiled and said, "Look at you, standing tall." I woke with tears on my face and sunlight streaming through my windows. It was day 3, and I was still standing. The phone call came 6 days after I changed the locks. It was 2 in the morning, and I woke from deep sleep with my heart already pounding, knowing before I answered that something was wrong. "Mrs. Pritchard," a professional voice, female, calm in that way that means they're trained for crisis. "This is Carolina Medical Center. Your son, Marcus Pritchard, was brought into our emergency room about an hour ago. He's stable, but he's been asking for you." I was out of bed, pulling on clothes, before she finished the sentence. "What happened?" "I can't give details over the phone, but he's in stable condition. If you can come." I'm on my way. I drove through empty streets, through red lights I barely saw, my hands gripping the wheel so tight, my knuckles went white. Marcus, my Marcus, in the hospital, asking for me. The ER waiting room smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee. A security guard directed me to the desk, where a tired-looking nurse checked her computer. "Pritchard Marcus, room 7. I'll take you back." She gave me a look I couldn't quite read. Pity, maybe, or understanding. "He's okay, really, but he's going to need you." She led me through a maze of curtained bays. I could hear beeping machines, low conversations, someone crying behind a closed door. Then she pulled back a curtain, and there he was. Marcus sat on the edge of an exam table in a hospital gown, his left arm in a temporary splint, his face swollen on one side, a cut above his eyebrow that had been cleaned but looked angry and raw. He looked up when he saw me, and his face crumpled. "Mom," he whispered. I was across the room before I knew I'd moved, my arms around him, careful of his injured arm. He leaned into me and sobbed, deep, wrenching sounds that came from somewhere I'd never heard before. "I'm here," I said over and over. "I'm here. You're okay. I'm here." A doctor appeared, young, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Mrs. Pritchard? I'm Dr. Ramos. Your son has a fractured ulna, that's his forearm, and some contusions and lacerations. Nothing life-threatening, but he's going to be sore for a while." "What happened?" I asked, though part of me already knew. Part of me had known for days. Dr. Ramos glanced at Marcus, who was still pressed against my shoulder. "He reported a fall down a flight of stairs, at a motel where he's been staying." Another meaningful look. "Mrs. Pritchard, I need to ask, is there anything you want to tell me about how you got these injuries, Marcus?" Marcus pulled back from me, wiping his eyes with his good hand. "I fell, like I said, down carpeted motel stairs, and broke your arm and got bruises in a pattern that suggests..." Dr. Ramos stopped, choosing his words carefully. "Look, I'm not trying to cause problems, but I've been doing this a long time. Falls downstairs don't usually result in defensive wounds on the forearms." "Defensive wounds?" I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Marcus wouldn't meet my eyes. "It was an accident." "Marcus," I took his chin gently, made him look at me. "Tell me the truth. Did Chelsea do this to you? His eyes filled with tears again. He nodded, just barely. The world tilted. She hit you? We were arguing, he said quickly, like he was defending her even now. About money. About the social services call. She was upset and I said maybe you were right. Maybe we needed some space from each other and she lost it. Started throwing things. I tried to calm her down and she pushed me. I fell against the dresser, then down when I tried to get up. She didn't mean... Stop, I said. My voice came out harder than I intended. Stop making excuses for her. She hurt you. She broke your arm. That's not an accident, Marcus. That's assault. I don't want to press charges, he said immediately. Mom, please. She's my wife. She was just upset. Where is she now? He hesitated. At the motel. She wanted to come to the hospital, but I couldn't. I couldn't have her here, so I told her to wait. Dr. Ramos cleared his throat. Mr. Pritchard, I'm required by law to report suspected domestic violence. I can't force you to press charges, but there will be a police report, and I strongly encourage you to speak with our social worker about resources. I don't need resources, Marcus said. I need to go home. You can't go back to that motel, I said. Not tonight. Not with her there. I don't have anywhere else. Yes, you do. I looked at Dr. Ramos. How long before he can be discharged? We need to get a proper cast on that arm. Get some paperwork done. Maybe 2 hours. I'll wait. I turned back to Marcus. You're coming home with me. Just you. Not her. We're going to figure this out, but you're not going back to that motel room tonight. I expected him to argue. Expected him to defend Chelsea. To insist it wasn't that bad. To say he couldn't leave his wife. Instead, he just nodded, looking exhausted and broken, and younger than I'd seen him in years. Okay, Mom, he whispered. Okay. Dr. Ramos left to arrange for the cast. A social worker came in. A different one, not Lisa Chen, and talked to Marcus about domestic violence, about patterns of abuse, about safety planning. She gave him pamphlets he stuffed in his pocket without reading. She gave me a look that said she'd seen this before, that she knew he probably wouldn't leave, but at least she'd tried. While they were putting the cast on Marcus's arm, my phone buzzed. Chelsea. Where is he? The hospital won't tell me anything. I'm his wife. I have a right to know. I stepped out into the hallway to answer. He's being treated. He'll be fine. I want to see him. No. Silence. Then, you can't keep me from my husband. I'm not keeping you from anyone. He doesn't want to see you right now. He asked for me. Because you've poisoned him against me. Her voice was rising, getting shrill. You've been waiting for this, haven't you? Waiting for a chance to turn him against me. You couldn't stand that he chose me over you. He didn't choose you over me, Chelsea. He chose you along with me. There was never supposed to be a competition. I took a breath, tried to keep my voice level. And now he's choosing to not see you because you broke his arm. It was an accident. I already told him that. I pushed him and he fell. I didn't mean for him to get hurt. It doesn't matter if you meant it. You did it. And now he needs space. I'm calling a lawyer. I'm calling the police. You can't kidnap my husband. He's a grown man making his own choice. If you want to talk to him, you can try calling him. But he's coming home with me tonight. And if you show up at my house, I'll call the police myself. I hung up before she could respond. When I went back into the exam room, Marcus was staring at his new cast. Bright white, still drying, making his arm look strange and fragile. She called, I said. He nodded. I heard your end of it. A pause. Thank you. For what? For not saying, I told you so. I sat down next to him on the exam table. Marcus, I'm not happy about this. I'm not glad you're hurt. I would have given anything for me to be wrong about her. But you weren't wrong. He said it so quietly. I almost didn't hear. About any of it. The controlling, the manipulation, the threats. I didn't want to see it. And when you kicked us out, I told myself you were overreacting, being dramatic. But then we were alone in that motel room, and without you there to absorb her anger, to be her target, it all came at me. Every bit of it. How long has she been hurting you? This is the first time she got physical. But the other stuff, the criticism, the put-downs, the way she makes me feel like I can't do anything right, that's been there from the beginning. I just thought that's what marriage was. That's what compromise looked like. He laughed bitterly. Dad never would have put up with this. Your father would have been proud of you for recognizing it. That takes strength, Marcus. I don't feel strong. I feel like an idiot. Like I failed at my marriage, failed at protecting you, failed at everything. You didn't fail. You loved someone who turned out to be different than you thought. That's not failure. That's just life. Painful, disappointing life. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Marcus said, "What do I do now?" Now, you heal, you rest, and when you're ready, you decide what kind of life you want. But that's a decision for tomorrow, not tonight. We left the hospital just as the sun was coming up. I'd called ahead to Howard Miller, who'd arranged for a patrol car to drive by the house periodically, just in case Chelsea decided to cause problems. Marcus fell asleep in the passenger seat on the drive home, his casted arm propped awkwardly against the window. When we pulled into the driveway on Magnolia Street, he woke up and looked at the house like he was seeing it for the first time. "I grew up here," he said. "You did. I learned to ride a bike on this sidewalk. Dad taught me to throw a baseball in that yard. You made me hot chocolate in that kitchen every time I had a bad day." His voice cracked. How did I forget all that? How did I let her make me forget what home was supposed to feel like? "Come on," I said gently. "Let's get you inside." I'd kept his old room mostly the same. Not as a shrine, just because I'd never had a reason to change it. The baseball trophies were still on the shelf. The Blue Ridge Parkway poster was still on the wall. I'd put fresh sheets on the bed the day after I'd kicked them out, some part of me hoping he'd come back. Marcus stood in the doorway looking around. "My cast signed yet?" he asked, trying to smile. "Give it time. Let's get you some rest first." He climbed into bed, still wearing his jeans and the hospital shirt they'd given him. I pulled a blanket over him like I used to when he was small. "Mom?" he said as I was turning to leave. "Yeah? I'm sorry. For everything. For not believing you. For bringing her here. For all of it." I sat on the edge of the bed. "I know, sweetheart. And we'll work through it. But right now, you need to sleep. We'll talk when you're ready." He was asleep before I closed the door. I went downstairs and made coffee, even though I was exhausted. My hands were shaking with adrenaline and relief and fear. Marcus was home. Marcus was safe. But for how long? What happened when Chelsea showed up? What happened when Marcus had to face the reality of his broken marriage? The doorbell rang at 8:30. I looked through the peephole and saw her, Chelsea, still in pajama pants and a sweatshirt, mascara smudged under her eyes, looking wild and desperate. I didn't open the door. "I know he's in there," she called through the wood. "Marcus! Marcus, please! I'm so sorry, baby. I didn't mean it. I was just scared and angry, and I love you so much. Please just talk to me." I picked up my phone and called the non-emergency police number. Officer Peterson answered, the same one who'd been there the day I changed the locks. "Mrs. Pritchard, everything okay? My daughter-in-law is at my door. She's not welcome here, and she's refusing to leave. My son is inside, recovering from injuries she caused. I need someone to come remove her from my property." On my way, I stayed by the door, listening to Chelsea alternate between pleading and threatening. "I'll tell everyone what you did. I'll ruin you. Marcus, if you don't come out here right now, I swear to God." Then softer, "Please, baby. I love you. We can work this out. Your mother's just trying to turn you against me. Don't let her win." Officer Peterson arrived within 10 minutes. I heard him talking to Chelsea outside. Heard her voice get higher, more frantic. Then everything went quiet. A knock. "Mrs. Pritchard, it's Officer Peterson. She's gone." I gave her a warning about harassment and explained that if she comes back, she'll be arrested for trespassing. I opened the door. "Thank you. How's Marcus?" "Broken arm. Bruised. Sleeping." Peterson shook his head. "I've known that boy since he was in Little League. Never thought I'd see him in a situation like this." "Neither did I. She's going to keep trying, you know. They always do. You might want to consider a restraining order." "I will, once Marcus is ready to take that step." After Peterson left, I sat in my mother's chair and watched the morning unfold outside the window. Neighbors walking dogs, kids riding bikes to school. Normal life continuing around us while inside this house, everything had changed. Marcus slept until almost 2 in the afternoon. I heard him moving around upstairs, heard the shower running. When he came down, he was wearing his old high school t-shirt that I'd kept in his closet and a pair of sweatpants. His hair was wet. His cast was wrapped in a plastic bag. "Hey," he said. "Hey yourself. How are you feeling?" "Sore, confused, hungry." "I can fix one of those things. Sit down." I made him grilled cheese and tomato soup, his favorite lunch as a kid. He ate slowly, carefully, using his good hand. I sat across from him with coffee I didn't really want, just needing something to hold. "She came by," I said finally. "I heard. From upstairs." He set down his spoon. "What did she say?" "That she loves you. That she's sorry. That I'm trying to turn you against her." "Are you?" I looked at him steadily. "No, Marcus. I'm trying to keep you safe. There's a difference." He nodded slowly. "I know. I'm sorry. That was unfair. You can ask me anything, even unfair things." He was quiet for a long time, pushing soup around in his bowl. Then, "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to end a marriage. I don't know what comes next. One day at a time," I said. "Today you rest and heal. Tomorrow maybe we call Howard Miller and talk about your options. Next week, maybe you start looking for an apartment. Next month, maybe you file for divorce. But we don't have to figure it all out today. What if I'm not strong enough?" "You are. You just haven't needed to be yet." I reached across the table, careful of his cast, and took his hand. "Your father used to say that courage isn't not being afraid. It's being afraid and doing the thing anyway. You're going to be afraid, Marcus, of being alone, of failing, of what people will think. But you're going to do it anyway, because the alternative is worse. Going back to her, losing yourself. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely. And there's a difference between being married and being safe." He squeezed my hand. "When did you get so wise?" "When I had to. Same time you're getting wise now." That afternoon, we sat on the back porch, and I told him everything. About the mineral rights, about my mother's envelope, about the fact that I wasn't a poor widow who needed help, but a woman who'd been living quietly because that's what my mother taught me. That wealth without wisdom is just noise, but strength without display is power. Marcus listened with his mouth slightly open, his eyes getting wider with each revelation. "You're telling me you're sitting on millions of dollars in mineral rights?" he asked finally. "According to the assessments, yes. And you never told anyone?" "I told Howard Miller. And now I'm telling you." "Why? Why tell me now?" I looked at him carefully. "Because you need to understand something, Marcus. Chelsea saw me as vulnerable, as someone to manage, to control, to eventually push aside. She built her whole strategy around the idea that I was weak and dependent. And you," I paused, making sure he heard this, "you started to see me that way too, because she convinced you I needed help that I didn't actually need." He flinched. "Mom, I'm not saying it to hurt you. I'm saying it so you understand what she did. She didn't just try to take over my house. She tried to take over my identity, make me smaller, so she could be bigger. And she almost succeeded. Why didn't you tell me before?" when we first moved in? Because I wanted to see who you were when you thought I had nothing, when there was no inheritance to protect, no money to inherit. I wanted to see if you'd stand up for me, just because it was right, not because it was profitable." He looked stricken. "And I didn't. I let her treat you like I didn't protect you." "No," I agreed. "You didn't. And that's something you're going to have to live with and learn from. But Marcus, you're here now. You're learning now. That's what matters." We sat in silence, watching clouds move across the late afternoon sky. Finally, Marcus said, "What are you going to do? With the money?" "I don't know yet. Maybe sell some of the rights. Keep living here. Maybe donate some to the church. Help some people who actually need it. Maybe travel. See the world the way Mom always wanted to but never did." I smiled. The beauty of having options is that I don't have to decide today. I can take my time. Can I stay here while I figure things out? I'll pay rent, contribute to groceries. Yes, but on one condition. What? You go to counseling. Real counseling. Not just a few sessions to check a box. You need to understand how you ended up here. What made you vulnerable to someone like Chelsea? What patterns you need to break so you don't repeat them? He nodded slowly. "Okay. Yeah, I can do that. And Marcus, if she contacts you, when she contacts you, you don't respond unless it's through a lawyer. You don't meet her alone. You don't try to work things out. Not until you're strong enough to see her clearly. How will I know when I'm strong enough? You'll know. Trust me. You'll know." That evening we ordered pizza and watched an old movie, something mindless and comforting. Marcus fell asleep on the couch before it was over, his casted arm propped on a pillow, his face finally peaceful. I covered him with a blanket and sat in my mother's chair, watching him sleep like I'd done when he was small, counting his breaths, making sure he was really there. My phone buzzed. A text from Chelsea. "You can't keep him from me forever. He's my husband. He loves me. And when he remembers that, you're going to be alone again, just like you deserve." I deleted the message without responding. She was wrong. I wasn't alone. I was standing on my own ground, in my own strength, with my son safe under my roof. And if that wasn't winning, I didn't know what was. Over the next 2 weeks, a rhythm developed. Marcus went to work. His boss had been understanding about the accident and came home for dinner. We cooked together, talked about nothing and everything, slowly rebuilt the relationship that had been fractured. He started seeing a counselor, a woman named Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, who specialized in domestic abuse survivors. "She doesn't let me make excuses," he told me after his 3rd session. "Every time I start to justify Chelsea's behavior, she stops me and asks, 'Would you want your mother to stay with someone who treated her that way?' And when I say no, she asks why I deserve less. Smart woman. She wants me to do something called EMDR. Says it helps process trauma." He looked embarrassed. "I didn't think I had trauma. But Mom, when I think about going back to that motel room, about seeing Chelsea angry, my hands start shaking. Is that trauma?" "Yes, sweetheart, that's trauma. Chelsea tried everything. Flowers delivered to the house. I refused them. Letters slipped under the door. Marcus threw them away unread on Dr. Okonkwo's advice. Phone calls from unknown numbers. We stopped answering. She created fake email accounts to get around his blocks, sent messages that alternated between apologies and threats. Howard Miller filed for a restraining order on Marcus's behalf. At the hearing, Chelsea showed up with her own lawyer, paid for by her parents, we learned, and cried on the stand about how much she loved her husband, how the incident was just an accident, how his mother was manipulating him. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and no patience for nonsense, looked at the photos of Marcus's injuries, read the hospital report, and granted the order. "Mrs. Pritchard," she said to Chelsea, I've been on this bench for 22 years. I've heard every excuse, every justification, every sob story. And you know what I've learned? People who truly love each other don't break each other's bones. Stay away from Mr. Pritchard for 6 months. If at the end of that time he wants contact, he can petition the court. Until then, no calls, no texts, no contact of any kind. Do you understand? Chelsea's face had gone pale with rage, but she nodded. As we left the courthouse, Marcus let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for days. "It's really over," he said, wonder in his voice. "I'm really free. The legal part is," I said. "The emotional part takes longer. But yes, you're free to start." That night, we sat on the back porch with iced tea and watched fireflies in the garden. The roses I'd deadheaded weeks ago were blooming again, pink and full and fragrant. "I want to tell you something," Marcus said. "Something I should have said weeks ago." "Okay, you were right about everything. About Chelsea, about how she was treating you, about me not standing up for you. And I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have protected you. You opened your home to us and I let her take it over. I let her threaten you. I chose being comfortable over doing what was right. I reached over and took his good hand. You're doing what's right now. That's what matters. Is it enough? To make up for it? Marcus, there's nothing to make up for. You're my son. I love you. Even when you disappoint me, even when you make mistakes, even when you choose wrong, I still love you. That's what mothers do." He was crying now, quiet tears running down his face in the twilight. "I don't deserve that. None of us deserve the grace we're given, but we receive it anyway, and then we try to pass it on." I squeezed his hand. "That's what your grandmother taught me. That's what I'm trying to teach you." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from blue to purple to black, watching stars appear one by one, watching the world continue despite our small dramas and large pains. "What happens now?" Marcus asked eventually. "Now, you heal, you grow, you figure out who you are without someone telling you who you should be. And when you're ready, you start over. Maybe you date again someday. Maybe you don't. Maybe you stay here in Asheville. Maybe you move somewhere new. But whatever you do it as a stronger man than you were 2 weeks ago. And you? What are you gonna do?" I thought about it. About the mineral rights and the house and the life I'd been living quietly for so long. "I think," I said slowly, "I'm going to start traveling. Your grandmother always wanted to see Ireland. Walk the cliffs of Moher. Kiss the Blarney Stone. I think I'll go for her. And then maybe Italy. Maybe Spain. Maybe I'll spend a few months just wandering and figuring out who Evelyn Pritchard is when she's not being someone's mother or someone's caretaker." "You'd sell the house?" "No, never. But I'd leave it for a while. Let it breathe. Let me breathe. And when I come back, I'll know what I want to do with the rest of my life." That sounds, he searched for the word, brave. "It feels terrifying," I admitted. "But your father used to say that courage and terror feel pretty much the same on the inside. It's just what you do with the feeling that matters." Marcus smiled. A real smile. The first genuine one I'd seen in weeks. He was a smart man. The smartest I ever knew. Besides you. We sat until the mosquitoes drove us inside. Until the fireflies disappeared and the crickets took over the night sounds. Until it felt like we'd said everything that needed saying, at least for today. As we locked up the house, my sanctuary, my battleground and my refuge, I thought about what Father Miguel had said, about the father watching the road for his son to come home, about the faith it takes to let someone fall and the strength it takes to welcome them back. I'd done both, and somehow we'd survived. In the morning, I'd call a travel agent. I'd start planning that trip to Ireland. I'd begin the next chapter of my life, the one where I wasn't waiting for permission or approval or for someone to tell me what I deserved. But tonight I stood at my mother's window and looked out at the garden she'd planted, in the house she'd left me, and I whispered thank you to the grandmother who'd known I'd need strength someday, who'd given me tools I didn't know I'd use, who'd believed I could stand tall even when I felt small. The house was quiet. The locks were secure. My son was safe in his old room. And I was finally, fully, completely myself again, standing on my own ground, just like my mother had taught me. 3 months after Marcus came home with a broken arm and a broken marriage, I stood in Shannon Airport holding a cup of terrible coffee and watching rain streak down the windows. Ireland looked exactly like the postcards my mother had collected, green and gray and impossibly soft, even from inside the terminal. I'd left Marcus in charge of the house. He'd insisted I go, practically pushed me onto the plane. "Mom, you've spent 3 months making sure I'm okay. Now it's time for you to be okay." He'd hugged me at the airport in Charlotte, careful even though his cast had come off weeks ago. Some injuries take longer to heal than broken bones. Go find whatever it is you're looking for. I'll be here when you get back. The divorce papers had been filed 2 weeks earlier. Chelsea had contested everything. Wanted alimony, wanted half of Marcus's 401k, wanted compensation for emotional distress. Howard Miller had handled it all with calm efficiency, and Marcus had stopped flinching every time his phone rang. "She can't hurt me anymore," he'd told me the night before I left. "Not the way she used to. Dr. Okonkwo says that's progress." It was, but I could still see the shadows in his eyes sometimes, the way he tensed when a woman's voice got sharp, the way he apologized too quickly for things that weren't his fault. Healing wasn't linear. It was messy and slow and full of setbacks, but he was healing. That was what mattered. Now I was in Ireland with a rental car I was terrified to drive on the wrong side of the road, and a guidebook my mother had annotated 40 years ago with notes she'd never gotten to use. "Must see Connemara," she'd written in her precise handwriting. "Find the wild ponies." So that's where I went first. Connemara was everything the guidebook promised. Stone walls and sheep and sky that went on forever. I drove slowly, stopping every few miles to take photos that couldn't possibly capture what I was seeing. At a small pub in Clifton, I ordered fish and chips and sat by the window watching rain and thinking about nothing in particular. "First time in Ireland?" the bartender asked. She was probably 60, with silver hair and eyes that had seen enough of life to recognize a fellow traveler. "Yes. My mother always wanted to come, but never did." "Ah, so you're here for her?" "I suppose I am." She nodded like that made perfect sense. "We get a lot of that. People living the dreams their parents couldn't. It's a beautiful thing. Sad, maybe, but beautiful." I walked the cliffs of Moher in wind that nearly knocked me over, stood at the edge and looked down at waves crashing hundreds of feet below, and thought about how small we all are, how brief, how the earth doesn't care about our dramas or our broken hearts. It just keeps turning, keeps breathing, keeps being impossibly, terribly beautiful. I kissed the Blarney Stone even though it was tourist nonsense because my mother had circled it 3 times in her guidebook. I wandered through Trinity College in Dublin and sat in the long room library, feeling like I'd stepped into a cathedral made of books. I spent a week in a cottage in County Kerry with no television and spotty internet, just me and the rain and books I'd been meaning to read for years. And slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice, something shifted inside me. The anger I'd been carrying started to feel less like a stone and more like a memory. The hurt Chelsea had caused started to feel less immediate, less raw. I could think about those 32 days without my chest tightening. Could think about Marcus driving away with her without wanting to cry. I'd done what I needed to do. We'd all survived. That was enough. In a small church in Galway, Catholic, old enough that the stones seemed to hold centuries of prayers, I lit a candle for my mother, for my father, for Marcus's father, For everyone who'd loved me and left me and shaped who I'd become. And I lit one for myself, for the woman I'd been when I opened my door to my son and his wife, for the woman who'd said enough, for the woman standing here now, alone in Ireland, learning how to be free. A priest appeared beside me, elderly, with kind eyes. "Someone special?" he asked, gesturing to the candles. "Everyone who got me here," I said. He smiled. "That's the whole congregation, then." We stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then he said, "You know, people think forgiveness is about the other person, about letting them off the hook. But really it's about you, about putting down the weight so you can walk lighter." "I'm not sure I'm ready to forgive yet," I admitted. "That's all right. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a door you walk through when you're ready. The door is always there. You'll know when it's time." I thought about that as I drove back to my cottage. About forgiveness. About whether I could ever forgive Chelsea for what she'd done to Marcus. To me. To our family. Whether I even wanted to. The answer, I realized, was complicated. I didn't want to forget. Didn't want to pretend it hadn't happened. But maybe I didn't want to carry the anger anymore either. It was exhausting being angry. And I'd spent so much of my life being tired. That night I called Marcus. It was early afternoon in Asheville, and he was on his lunch break at work. "Mom, how's Ireland?" "Wet. Beautiful. Everything Mom said it would be." "I'm glad you're there. You sound different." "Different how?" He paused, thinking. "Lighter. Like you're smiling more, even when you're not talking." "Maybe I am." I looked out at the Irish twilight, at the sheep dotting the hillside like clouds that had fallen to earth. "How are you doing?" "Good days and bad days, but more good than bad now." He took a breath. "Chelsea called my office yesterday. She somehow got the number. Started crying, said she's in therapy, said she's changed, asked if I'd meet her for coffee. My stomach tightened. "What did you say?" I said no. Dr. Okonkwo has been preparing me for this, for when she tries to come back. She says they always try to come back when they realize they've really lost control. He sounded proud of himself. I told Chelsea that I hope therapy helps her, but I'm not part of her healing process, that I need to focus on my own. Marcus, that's really strong." "Yeah, I felt strong saying it too. Scared, but strong." We talked for another 20 minutes about nothing important. His work, the neighbors, whether the roses needed pruning. Normal things. Family things. The kind of conversation we'd have had before Chelsea, before the locks changed, before everything fell apart and had to be put back together. When we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness and felt something like peace. I spent 6 weeks in Ireland, then another month in Italy, like I'd planned. I walked through Florence and Venice and Rome, stood in the Sistine Chapel with my neck craned back until it ached, threw coins in the Trevi Fountain because why not? I was 64 years old and finally learning how to want things for myself. In a small trattoria in Tuscany, I met an American couple about my age, Linda and Robert from Portland. They were celebrating their 40th anniversary, and somehow I ended up telling them my whole story over too much wine and perfect pasta. "Good for you," Linda said when I finished. "My sister went through something similar. Let her son and his wife move in, and the wife tried to take over everything. But my sister just kept making herself smaller and smaller until she practically disappeared. Ended up in assisted living at 68. Not because she needed it, but because she'd convinced herself she was helpless. That could have been me," I said quietly. "But it wasn't," Robert pointed out. "That's the difference. You fought back. I just didn't want to be small anymore." "Then stay big," Linda said, raising her glass. "Keep taking up space. Keep being inconvenient. Keep reminding people that you're a whole person, not just someone's mother or someone's burden." We toasted to that, to being inconvenient, to taking up space. When I flew home in December, 3 months after I'd left, Asheville was dressed up for Christmas. Lights on the buildings downtown, wreaths on the doors. That particular magic that only happens when winter and hope collide. Marcus picked me up at the airport. He looked different. Stronger, maybe, or just more settled in his own skin. His hair was a little longer. He'd started going to the gym. He smiled when he saw me. A real smile that reached his eyes. "Welcome home, Mom." "It's good to be back." We drove through town, and I watched my city slide past the windows. Changed and unchanged, familiar and new. It felt like coming home after a very long day. That sense of finally being able to exhale. The house on Magnolia Street looked beautiful in the winter afternoon light. Someone, Marcus, I realized, had strung white lights along the porch railing and put a wreath on the door. The garden was dormant for winter, but tended, loved. "I hired a gardener," Marcus said as we pulled into the driveway. "Hope that's okay. I didn't want it to get overgrown while you were gone." "It's more than okay. Thank you." Inside, everything was clean and orderly. Marcus had clearly been taking care of the place. No dishes in the sink, no dust on the furniture, fresh flowers in my mother's vase on the dining room table. "I wanted it to be nice when you came home," he said, looking almost shy. "After everything you did for me." "Marcus," I set down my suitcase and took his hands. "You don't owe me this. You don't owe me anything." "I know, but I wanted to. I wanted you to come home and feel like you were coming home to something good." I pulled him into a hug. "Thank you, sweetheart." That evening, we ordered Chinese food and sat at the kitchen table catching up properly. Marcus told me about work. He'd gotten a raise. About therapy. He was down to every other week now, making real progress. About his divorce. It would be final in another 2 months. "How do you feel about that?" I asked. He thought about it. "Relieved, mostly. Sad sometimes, not for Chelsea, but for who I thought she was. For the marriage I thought we had. But mostly relieved." "That's healthy. Dr. Okonkwo says I'm allowed to grieve what I thought I had, even if it was never real. That's been helpful, actually. Permission to be sad about the loss without wanting her back." "Wise woman." "Yeah." He pushed fried rice around on his plate. "There's something else I need to tell you." My stomach tightened. "Okay. I've been looking at apartments. Not because I don't love being here. I do. But because I think I need my own space. Need to prove to myself I can do it. Can live alone. Take care of myself. Not need someone else to define who I am." Relief washed through me. Not because I wanted him gone, but because he was strong enough to want to go. "I think that's wonderful," I said. "Really? You're not hurt?" "Marcus, I would be hurt if you were leaving because you had to. Because we couldn't stand each other or because you were running away. But leaving because you're ready to stand on your own? That's something to celebrate." He smiled, relieved. "I found a place downtown. A loft in one of the converted mills. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. I sign the lease next week. Then we should have a housewarming party. Invite your friends. Christen the space properly." We spent the next hour looking at photos of his new place on his phone, talking about furniture and paint colors and whether he should get a cat. Normal things, father and son things. The kind of conversation that felt easy and light because we'd done the hard work of getting here. Later that night, after Marcus had gone to bed, I sat in my mother's chair by the window and looked out at the winter garden. The lights Marcus had strung cast everything in a warm glow. It looked magical, peaceful. My phone buzzed, an email from Howard Miller with the subject line, "Mineral rights offer." I opened it. A mining company was making a serious offer for a 20-year lease on the mineral rights. The numbers were staggering, enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life, to help Marcus if he needed it, to donate to causes I believed in, to finally do all the things my mother had dreamed of but never done. I sat with it for a long time, thought about what my mother would want, what I wanted. what kind of life I was building in whatever time I had left. Then I called Howard, even though it was late. "Evelyn," he said warmly. "Welcome home. Did you get my email?" "I did. I want to take the offer, but with conditions." "I'm listening." "I want a scholarship fund established at St. Catherine's for single mothers who need help with education or job training. I want it anonymous. No one needs to know it came from me. Can we do that?" "Absolutely. What else?" "I want to donate to the women's shelter downtown, the one that helps domestic violence survivors. Again, anonymous. Done." "Anything else?" "Yes. I looked around my mother's house, at the walls that had held so much life and love and pain. I want to set up a trust for Marcus. Not give it to him now. He doesn't need money to solve his problems. He needs to solve them himself. But when I'm gone, I want him to have security, to know he's taken care of. Can we do that without telling him yet?" "We can. Evelyn, these are beautiful choices. Your mother would be proud." After we hung up, I sat for a long time in the quiet house, thinking about legacy, about what we leave behind, about how my mother had left me strength disguised as money, and how I could pass that along in my own way. Christmas came. Marcus and I spent it quietly, just the two of us, cooking together, watching old movies, building a fire in the fireplace that we almost never used. It was peaceful, easy, the kind of Christmas I'd been dreaming of during those hard days in September. On Christmas Eve, we went to midnight mass at St. Catherine's. The church was packed, candlelit, filled with voices singing "O Holy Night." I sat in our usual pew and felt my mother's presence like a hand on my shoulder. Father Miguel's homily was about Mary, not the sanitized version from Christmas cards, but the real woman, the teenage girl who'd said yes to something impossible and terrifying, who'd given birth in a stable and raised a son who would break her heart, who'd stood at the foot of the cross and watched him die. Mary said yes, Father Miguel told us, not knowing what it would cost her. She said yes because she trusted that even in the pain, even in the darkness, there was a purpose, there was love. And that's what faith is, not the absence of fear or pain, but the courage to say yes anyway. I thought about my own yes, the one I'd said when I opened my door to Marcus and Chelsea, the one I'd said when I changed the locks, the one I was saying now, every day, choosing myself while still loving my son. Maybe that was what grace looked like. Not the easy acceptance, but the hard boundaries. Not the unlimited tolerance, but the courageous no that made room for better yeses. After Mass, Eleanor Patterson found me in the vestibule. "Evelyn, dear, I heard you were traveling. How was it?" "Life-changing," I said, in the quietest way. She squeezed my hand. "Your mother would be so pleased to see you standing tall." "I'm trying to. It shows. You look lighter, freer, like you've put down something heavy." "I think I have." She smiled. "Good. Hold on to that. And remember, you don't owe anyone your peace. Not ever." New Year's Eve, I spent alone by choice. Marcus was at a party with friends from work. New friends. People who hadn't known him as Chelsea's husband, who only knew him as Marcus. He'd been nervous about going, but Dr. Okonkwo had encouraged it. "You need to build a life that's yours," she'd told him. "That means taking risks, meeting people, trying again." So he'd gone, and I'd stayed home with champagne I didn't drink, and a book I didn't read. Instead, I sat in my mother's chair and thought about the year that was ending, about how it had started with me alone and content, had descended into chaos and pain, and was ending with me alone again, but different, stronger. Sure. My phone rang at 11:58. Marcus. "Mom, I just wanted to say it before midnight. Thank you for everything, for saving me, for showing me what strength looks like, for loving me enough to let me fall and then helping me get back up." My throat tightened. "You saved yourself, Marcus. I just held the door open. Maybe But you were the one who taught me there was a door, that I didn't have to stay in a place that was hurting me just because I'd made a promise." He paused. "I'm going to be okay, Mom. We're going to be okay." "I know, sweetheart. I know." At midnight, I stood on the back porch in the cold and listened to fireworks in the distance. The neighborhood was loud with celebration, with hope for a new year. I thought about my mother, who'd saved her strength for me. About my father, who'd taught me that courage and fear feel the same. About Marcus's father, who'd shown me what good love looks like. And I thought about myself. About Evelyn Pritchard, 64 years old, standing in the cold on the first day of a new year, finally understanding what it meant to be whole. The door behind me opened. Marcus appeared with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "I came home early," he said. Couldn't imagine starting a new year anywhere but here. We stood together in the cold, drinking hot chocolate and watching our breath fog in the air. Father and son, survivors, family. "What are you hoping for this year?" Marcus asked. I thought about it, about all the things I could want. For him to heal completely, for the divorce to be final, for Chelsea to leave us alone forever. About travel and adventure and the life I was finally learning to build. But what I said was simpler. Peace. Just peace. That sounds perfect. We went inside when our fingers got too cold to hold the mugs. We locked the doors. My doors. My locks. My choice. We turned off the lights and went upstairs to our separate rooms. And I lay in my mother's bed, in my mother's house, with my mother's strength running through my veins. And I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Safe. Not because nothing bad could happen. Life had taught me that bad things always could happen. But because I knew, bone deep, that I could handle it. That I'd survived the worst and come out stronger. That I'd stood tall when it mattered most. The house settled around me with familiar creaks and sighs. Outside, the winter night was quiet now. The fireworks over. The celebrations winding down. In the morning, I'd wake up to a new year. To possibilities. To a life that was mine to shape. But tonight, I just rested. In my mother's house. On my mother's land. With my mother's strength wrapped around me like a blanket. And somewhere, I felt her smiling. Felt her presence in the walls and the floorboards and the stained glass windows. Felt her love in every careful choice she'd made to ensure I'd be okay. "Thank you, Mama," I whispered to the darkness, for teaching me to stand tall, for leaving me the tools I'd need, for believing I was strong enough, even when I didn't believe it myself. The house didn't answer, but I didn't need it to. I already knew what she'd say. "You were always strong enough, Evelyn. You just needed to remember." And now I had. Now I'd never forget again. Epilogue. 2 years later, I was in the garden deadheading roses when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked up to see Marcus getting out, and beside him, a woman, tall, with dark curly hair and an easy smile. She was holding a pie. "Mom," Marcus called, walking across the lawn. "This is Angela. I've been wanting you to meet her." Angela smiled nervously. "Mrs. Pritchard, it's so nice to finally meet you. Marcus talks about you constantly. I brought pie. I hope that's not too presumptuous. It's blueberry. I made it this morning." I set down my gardening shears and pulled off my gloves. Studied her for a moment. Not unkindly, but carefully. Looking for red flags, for warning signs, for anything that felt like Chelsea. What I saw was a woman who baked pie and looked nervous and held herself like she was used to standing on her own 2 feet. A woman who met my eyes directly and didn't try too hard. "It's not presumptuous at all," I said warmly. "It's lovely. Come in, both of you. Let me wash up and we'll have some coffee with that pie." Inside, I made coffee while Angela and Marcus sat at the kitchen table. I watched them together. The way he touched her hand lightly. The way she laughed at something he said. Easy. Natural. No edge of control or criticism. "Angela's a teacher," Marcus said. "4th grade. At Asheville Elementary. "That must be rewarding," I said, setting down mugs. "It is. Challenging too, but I love it." She accepted the coffee gratefully. "Marcus mentioned you traveled through Europe a couple years ago. That must have been incredible." We talked for an hour about teaching and traveling, and Marcus's new apartment and Angela's family in Charlotte. She asked questions without prying, laughed easily, complimented my garden without trying to tell me how to improve it. When they left, Marcus hugged me at the door. "So?" he asked quietly. "What do you think?" I looked past him at Angela, waiting by the car, giving us privacy. "I think she seems lovely," I said honestly. "But more importantly, what do you think?" "I think I'm happy. Actually happy. Not trying to make someone else happy. Not walking on eggshells. Just happy. Then that's all that matters." After they drove away, I went back to the garden. Back to my roses and my weeds and my quiet life. The house on Magnolia Street stood solid behind me. My mother's house. My refuge, and my fortress, and my home. I'd fought for it, bled for it, stood tall for it, and I'd do it all again. Because some things, some places, some truths, some versions of ourselves are worth fighting for. Even when the fight costs everything, especially then. I pulled another weed, felt the sun warm on my back, and smiled. I was 66 years old. I was standing tall, and I was finally, fully, completely free. The end. If you don't want to go live in a nursing home, you'll do as I say, my daughter-in-law said, a day after moving in with me out of charity. But the next day, I did something that would leave everyone in shock.